So the next presentation is just me. I only have, I think, 7 slides of content for this, so it is another really quick overview of a bill. I'm going to be talking about the school safety amendments. So once again, amendments to an existing bill that already had a lot around school safety. I mean, this bill includes not only like we're talking more about like student data privacy, safety, and data that we store digitally a lot. But this bill includes a lot about like physical safety of a school campus. So that's probably why it's so big, is it's kind of including all aspects of safety. Um, so I'm just going to be covering, once again, just the highlights that we saw as a data privacy group from that lens. There's lots of other stuff in here that, I mean, I've read the bill, so if you have questions about that, I'll do my best to answer. And if I can't find those answers right away, we can always follow up, or I can direct you to somebody on our school safety team that would probably better answer those types of questions. All right, so one of the biggies that we saw for student privacy in this bill was it now requires that school resource officers, as part of your contract that you have with them, that they be designated as school officials in reference to FERPA. So most of you are probably familiar. FERPA has an exception, we usually call it the school officials exception, where if you have somebody designated as a school official, that person can access student information using that exception. So all that's to say, if we are now requiring school resource officers to be designated as a school official, they will have that exception, and they will be able to access that student data with that exception if it arises. So if that situation arises. So this is, a straight up requirement, action, designate SROs as a school official in your LEA documentation. And then in your annual notice of FERPA rights, you likely already have a list of who is generally considered a school official. So you'll want to include SROs on that designation as well. So, people reading that notice are aware of that. And it would be recommended that you're making clear that anybody marked as a school official has that exception applied to them in FERPA. So that was a biggie for us. The other one that, I've heard floating around a lot, and I'm sure many of you are aware of, and Katie brought up in her first presentation today, is a requirement around early warning systems. In the bill, it talks about them being early warning programs. Those are the same thing. So there is now a requirement for all LEAs to have an early warning system or program that has the ability to identify students in need of intervention based on certain criteria. Yeah, so that's the requirement now. There are quite a few LEAs that are already using some type of early warning system, and this requirement now just extends it, so all LEAs need to be using some type of system. So the actions include, if your LEA does not already have a digital program that acts as an early warning system, it needs to work on acquiring one. There is also written into the bill that USBE will help pay for half of the cost of any system. Ensure that parents have the option to opt in students of any survey prepared by your LEA's early warning system / program. So Katie covered that in the survey bill that she did when we started. So those two things overlap between these two bills. So that's why I mentioned as stated in HB 182. And report to USBE on the effectiveness of your early warning system after using it for no later than 1 school year. So in terms of, somebody earlier today asked about like, when do we have to implement this? I couldn't find a specific due date for the early warning program itself. I can tell you that this section of the bill is effective 5/1/24. So I didn't see a specific due date for the early warning system itself. The section is in, becomes effective 5/1/24. the thing about this requirement is the way it is worded in the bill. It actually says like USBE is required to ensure that LEAs have access to an early warning program. So the way it is written, is almost like putting the responsibility on USBE to ensure that you guys have access to one. So I think that's partly why there's not a strict due date for LEAs, if that makes sense. If you look at the bill itself and the requirements, that wording and kind of what I'm saying might make a little more sense. So here are the lines in the bill, 1425, 1435, and right around there, that's where you're gonna find the actual verbatim wording for this requirement, which I always encourage people to check because I'm simplifying it, right? I'm saying this is the requirement, and at the end of the day, that is the requirement, but there are nuances here. So I encourage you to check that out. Did not see a due date specifically for the early warning program, but the bill is going to soon be in effect. So that's what I can tell you in terms of like dates and requirements to get this done. So I have a couple more things here. We kind of got through the biggies. But we have a requirement around action plans. So there are already requirements around creating action plans, but this is more just notifying parents of action plans. So in addition to notifying parents of incidents or threats, LEAs must share the action plan that will address the incident if one is being made. So just adding that to any kind of notification to parents about specific situations, making sure that action plans are also communicated.
Melissa,
Mm-hmm.
a question came in the chat about putting together, it says, I recall being told that USBE was putting together an RFP for an early warning system. And I just wanted to confirm that that is my understanding as well, that then I don't know when that process will, I imagine in the coming months, that process will take place. So do you have, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but I just wanted to say that verbally.
Yeah, I think go with what Katie just said. That's kind of what I've heard as well. I think we've all heard the same thing, and so that's what I'm gonna go off of. But I haven't heard any more confirming evidence around that yet.
And what, sorry, one more question that just came in. Is the action plan, so I think what you referred to on that last slide, is that referring to data breach issues?
No, so I think there is confusion because when we talk about data breaches, we talk about action plans. So what I was talking about was more if a student experiences bullying at school and it's identified as a bullying incident, you know, the bully and the student being bullied are both kind of talked to, and it's a situation that required some kind of action plan to be made around how are they going to move forward to hopefully prevent any further bullying. So that when I say action plan, that's the action plan I'm talking about. Action plans that we apply to situations with students. So in this instance, no, I'm not talking about data breaches. And if you look at the bill, it goes through like when do we need action plans and what situations do we need to make them in? And that's the language the bill uses, and that's why I say it, but I understand why it could be confusing. But simple answer your question, no, I was talking about a different kind of action plan. So hopefully that answers your question. All righty. So we have this a couple more slides. So this part, Katie and I went back and forth. We were going to include this. So this is not something you need to do anything about right now, but there's a line in the bill that talks about establishing integrations between USB-E data systems and a public data portal that is managed by the Commission on Criminal and Juvenile Justice. So the way it's written, it's a data exchange between USB-E and essentially CCJH. But we get most of our student data at USB-E from LEAs. So there could be implications down the road for LEA data systems around this type of data. But we don't know yet. There's nothing written in this bill specifically stating that. So just want to give a heads up for that.
Melissa, another question just came in. What exactly is the early warning system for? Is it a camera system that can tell if a student is going to do harm, or is it for mental health?
No. So although there are requirements around camera systems and other physical campus safety systems in this bill, what I'm talking about with an early warning system is a digital system, and it's all like, I guess it is a separate application from what I've talked with Katie and others, and you can correct me, Katie, because you probably know more about what that looks like. But it's a application that can collect student data. And then it's designed to be able to look at that data and look for certain behavior or markers that would suggest the student may need an intervention. So, for example, I think one of the suggested markers is attendance. If the student isn't attending school for a significant amount of time, that can be concerning. So the system can pick up on that and say, hey, this student hasn't been going to school. They'd maybe be getting a higher rate of incidents happening with them, um, getting sent to the office more often, those types of things. I would like to, I mean, as the application would like to suggest to you that the student could be at risk, and I would suggest you perform an intervention and just talk to them and see what's going on. So I'm talking about a digital system, and the bill kind of refers to it in that way. It's like a digital system that can do this, which is kind of why I've been trying to use the correct language, because we keep talking about an early warning system and we don't really define, we just keep using that term and we don't really talk about what that means. But the bill is really good about talking about what that means. So hopefully that answered that question around, it's not a camera system that's it's nothing to do with the cameras or anything like that. An early warning system that we're talking about in this instance is a digital data gathering and analysis system, essentially.
Melissa, this is Katie again.
Mhm.
I think your explanation was spot on. I'll just add that I think my understanding is that these typically integrate with a student information system. That's where, and it sort of like provides an avenue for using the data that might be in a student information system and formatting it in a way that helps school leaders and educators make, identify students who are in need of extra supports. And Robert asks, each LEA sets the thresholds. This can be a big challenge. My memory is, Melissa, that it directs USBE to identify that what qualifiers, I guess, would constitute something to engage with a student. Is that right? Oh yeah, okay, she's got it here.
Yeah, so the bill lists and once again, you're right, Katie. It kind of talks about it through the lens of like USBE has the responsibility to ensure that LEAs have. So yeah, so that's where that's coming from. But it does list the criteria, but also kind of leaves it open. So the criteria that it lists in the bill is discipline, including school safety violations, attendance, behavior, course failures, and anything else the board determines. So in terms of like what we're looking at, it sounds like the board is going to determine that. But I guess in terms of like how many missed absences or like the thresholds per criteria, I'm not sure on that. I would assume the board would also determine that, but not sure. And it sounds like in the chat there's a good experience example talking about what they're doing. Okay. All right, I'm gonna continue if we feel good about those questions. Only a couple more slides. Yeah, and so I just have my closing slides essentially. So we've already said with the other bills, encourage you to take a look, especially for these parts that you have questions about or might have more concerns over. That's why I tried to put the line numbers so you could just specifically look at those lines or around those lines for the things that I was talking about today. Really high level overview. There's a lot of other things in this bill around physical campus requirements. There's requirements around having kind of like a sweep of the campus, and they'll be checking for specific requirements when they do that. So that was a big part of the bill, as well as the school guardian program is a brand new thing. And that's, that's not a required program, my understanding, but if you want to participate in that, there's a lot of information about that as well. So just a lot of things in this bill that I would suggest taking a look at it. So that's all I had for this one for today. Like I said, we're always happy to take questions. If the person you're asking doesn't know, I already know whoever it is, they're going to do their darnest to find an answer for you from somebody who does. This bill and others where we have a lot of questions and discussion, our listserv is a great resource for that discussion as well.